Okay, so tonight's theme is surrendering to life. I was trying to come up with a theme on Sunday, and nothing was alive for me right then. And a little voice said, surrendering to life. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And then today I'm like, surrendering to life? What does that mean? And so I had to, I've been sitting with that. And so many nuances have been coming up for me around this. The first thing I want to say is that this whole theme of being able to even talk about surrendering to life and to the gifts and the beauty that life gives us comes from a place of privilege. I have been very privileged in my life. I was born into a middle class, white skinned family, and I had opportunities to not only live a fairly middle class life, but also I wasn't stuck in trying to survive my whole life. So people who are stuck in trying to survive and don't have their basic human needs met, I mean, talk about surrendering to life is like, that's just not applicable. So I have a lot of gratitude for the fact that I can even think about this or talk about it. Um, So, what does it mean to surrender to life? Um, it means a lot of things. The first thing that I think that it means is that from a practice standpoint, if we are being mindful and if we're being aware, and if your intention is to reduce your suffering and to be more free and more happy, then this life, if you have similar privileges that I have, will provide you with all of the resources and experiences you need to be free this life, right here. Whether it's beautiful or painful or neither. In fact, when the Buddha talked about all the different planes of existence in the human realm, he stated that the human realm was the most auspicious birth, the most auspicious plane to go to when you're reborn, because the human realm provides us with just enough suffering and pain and just enough beauty and joy to awaken, right? So he says it has a balance of those two, which will propel us towards freedom, towards this path. So what does surrender mean? Um, I looked it up, and it says to give oneself to up as to the police or someone else or something greater than oneself, to give oneself up to some influence, course, or emotion. And what I am presenting today is that life itself uh, appears to have some kind of intelligence, to know exactly what to provide us with, to get us to the next level of understanding or wisdom. If, like I said, if we're open to it. And you might be able to look over your own life, how different parts of your life, the experiences you had gave you the wisdom that you needed in order to gain the next depth of wisdom or the next depth of wisdom, right? And then you met just the right people in your life at the times when you were ready to gain the wisdom you needed to from those particular people. I've always seen life as a very mysterious and not always. At first, I didn't have any faith in life, nor did I surrender to it. I fought it every step of the way. Anyone else here fought life every step of the way? Yeah. Um, but once I started practicing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, I started surrendering to what is, because that's what the practice of mindfulness tells us to do. to be with what is, to accept and allow, to open completely. It's basically surrendering to what is, right? But if you study a lot of different spiritual practices besides Buddhism, most of the spiritual practices, their ultimate aim is to surrender. Either it's surrendering to God or God's will or whatever spiritual path asks you to do. This is Lori Descheny. She says, the reality is that tomorrow is most certainly uncertain. And no matter how many expectations we form, tomorrow will come, tomorrow will go, and it will be what it will be. But it'll most certainly be uncertain. When we don't surrender to life as it is, which I don't know any of us, I wasn't taught how to surrender. Anyone here taught how to surrender as a child? To accept and be with what is? My own parents were not the surrendering type, right? They were control freaks. They tried to control the 5 kids, every step we made. They controlled what we ate, what we drank, where we went, who we went with. Every minute of our day was overseen and controlled. And they had very high fear levels, right? And because of that fear level, they went into hyper over control mode. That was their way of loving, by trying to control us so nothing bad would happen. But to some degree, surrendering is giving up control. Some control at least, right? There's a distinction between setting boundaries, healthy boundaries, and making wise decisions and control. We still want to set healthy boundaries and make wise decisions. But when we let go of control, we realize that we can't control the outcome. We don't know what's going to happen. We truly don't know. But the ego mind doesn't understand this. So part of our practice is learning to work with and surrendering to the ego mind. When we first start practicing, we're learning to become really intimate with the mind's desire and constant attempt to control. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so the ego mind creates all these strategies and to try to find happiness, to try to be at peace. And it pushes away anything that it feels is not going to bring it this pleasurable happiness. And it avoids those things, pushes them away. And then it tries to cling to and pull to the things that we find pleasurable, things that we think will be sources of happiness and pleasure. And we do this for an entire lifetime before we realize that this strategy doesn't work. That we get these momentary glimpses or maybe a couple hours of pleasure, and then boom, we're stuck in the same hole once again of trying to find more pleasure and avoid more pain so that we can be happy. And then, I'll never forget when I was on a retreat, when this was explained to me. I was on a meditation retreat and I was, stuck in the loop like every ego mind. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is true. My mind definitely does that. And until we see that, we don't see that our mind is the source of our own unhappiness. Right? This aversion, pushing away and clinging and grasping. And this is, the cause of all of our suffering. It's a second noble truth. First noble truth is that there is suffering. Second noble truth, we suffer when we cling and we crave and we want and don't want. And we have to see this clearly. And if we're awake and alert and intentional about seeing it, we will see it. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with seeking, having pleasure. When I talk about this often, uh, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the beautiful things in life. We're just trying to see that that strategy is not going to bring us lasting happiness. It'll just bring us pleasure. Pleasant experience will bring us pleasure, which is temporary and not lasting. But once we see how fruitless this whole pattern of seeking and pushing and pulling and grasping and it's very painful. It's very painful. Yeah. I was on a retreat. I think I was in my, I don't know, I was young. It's when I first started going on retreats. And I saw how my mind was relentlessly evaluating every single thing and trying to control everything and planning. And then I saw how exhausting it was, right? I would get through 3 or 4 hours of my retreat, and then I had to go take a nap because I was exhausted by watching my mind with all of its strategies and attempts to control and grasp. And I even attempted to surrender, trying to surrender, trying to let go. Have you ever tried to let go? That's painful, isn't it? Yeah. So what are we surrendering to is the reality that number one, these strategies don't work. Number two, they don't work because everything is impermanent. There's nothing to grasp onto that is lasting. Anything we grasp onto will be temporary anyhow, and then we'll be trying to recreate it. Yeah. And we're surrendering to the reality that we're not separate, disconnected beings, that we're interdependent, interconnected beings, and we're one part of a web of life. That's our true nature. So when we're surrendering, we're actually surrendering out of the egoic mind into what? Our true nature, who we actually are. We're surrendering to letting go of our identities of who we think we are. We're not this separate, self-contained Rania who's ever thought a thought that other people haven't thought, who hasn't had an emotion that every other human being has had, right? Who hasn't suffered just as much, if not more, than I have. I was teaching a class earlier today, and I was talking about suffering and how suffering is what connects us all, right? If I can connect fully to my own stress or suffering when it arises, then every human being on this planet has suffered. It's part of the human condition. It's part of being the humanity, what connects everyone. That and who we truly are. But we have to have a measure of suffering in order to realize who we are. Right? We have to get caught in the sticky web before we realize we're a spider and we can walk through this web. Oh, yeah. But we have to see our deeply rooted assumptions clearly and how much pain they cause us, how much suffering they cause us. Yeah, and the assumptions that we make, right? Surrendering to reality as it is, not as society tells us it is or how we expect that it's going to be. When my son was 6 years old and my daughter was a year and a half, my husband at the time left and decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And He was going to run off to the beach with another woman. And I was devastated, totally devastated. And I didn't have any form of, I was really sick back then too. I'd had, my thyroid wasn't working, and I had a tubal rupture. I almost died. I still could barely walk from that. And then I had 2 young children and no way to support myself. I didn't have the energy or the wherewithal to do it. So what would be the assumption that anyone would make about that period in my life? That would be the worst time ever, right? That could destroy my life forever, that my kids and I would end up homeless or whatever. But I actually went on welfare. My family wanted to take me in, but I was like, no, I want to go on welfare. And I didn't want to go move back in with my parents. Went back to college. And I tell you, those were some of the richest, most beautiful years of my life, because I learned so many wonderful lessons. I learned humility. I learned that the people who lived in the low-income projects where I lived were beautiful people who had hardships, and all they wanted to do was try to figure out how to survive and how to get ahead in life. Not everyone was living the most skillful means of life, but they were all beautiful people. I learned to have gratitude for what I had and the opportunities I had in life. And when my health finally came back, I had so much gratitude for being healthy once again. But this practice, we're realigning our views with reality, right? We're learning to be with things as they are, and surrendering to things as they are, right? If I didn't surrender to that time in my life when I didn't totally give myself to, wow, this is how it is, and this is hard, I could have just sat in bitterness and decided, and I would have passed that bitterness on to my children, hatred and bitterness and self-pity and victimhood, right? Instead, I was like, oh, okay, this is how it is. I'm going to surrender to it. And what opportunities are in this situation that I can have right now? Oh, I can go back to college. Oh, I can get support from the government that when I really need it. And I can meet new friends. Paradoxically, in order to learn how to surrender, it takes effort, right? The Buddha's dying words, as I say often, is strive on with diligence. Strive on with diligence. So this practice, this particular path, asks us to practice meditating. And part of our meditation practice, we have to develop focus, concentration. We have to learn to relax, open to what is at this moment. See if we can't open in a relaxed way to whatever's arising. We're learning to say yes to how things are. We're learning to see things clearly as they are, not the way we want them to be. We're learning to see the pros and the cons and the wise way of relating to this moment. If I don't see all the pros and the cons and the whole spectrum of situation, then I'm not going to know how to relate wisely to what is, right? So we're practicing wise effort, because it's going to take a lot of effort to walk this path. We're also practicing wise view, which is what I just described, seeing everything clearly as it is. The nature of reality, impermanence. And we're also practicing mindfulness. We need to practice mindfulness in not only our meditation, formal practice, but from moment to moment, because that'll give us the wise view. It'll motivate us to have wise effort. Because with mindfulness, we see how we create suffering for ourselves. We see clearly how we alleviate suffering for ourselves. We see what leads to happiness and peace. We see what leads to stress and suffering. Right? But it takes, like I said, effort to continually have the intention to pay attention. Intention to pay attention. Say that 3 times quickly. Right? Sometimes practicing mindfulness, one of the students I had today, one of my groups, said that she's usually in such a tumble to go through life quickly and is trying to achieve so many things, that she needs to slow down enough to pay attention and be mindful. Right? So sometimes it means pausing, sacred pause. Maybe it means slowing down with the intention to really be present with whatever we're thinking and feeling and seeing and hearing. Yeah. When I first started practicing, I was formally practicing mindfulness. And then I would turn my mindfulness on anytime I got angry or reactive. I'd be like, oh, time to pay attention. Time to really pay attention. And so for years it was when I was meditating, and then when, chaos was occurring, I would become extra mindful. And that's very helpful. But eventually what I learned to do is to sustain the mindfulness, sustain it all day long as much as I can. Which it becomes a habit. So actually not being mindful is painful. It feels really stressful, right? Yeah. So develop the qualities of paying attention each moment. When you surrender to life as it is, there's an amazing amount of beauty in what is, to what's occurring each moment. Right? I go to a coffee shop with a couple of friends, and every time I go, I'm, like a puppy going to play with my other puppies, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's going to say what or what's going to happen. I went this morning, and this this guy with a big truck with these kayaks on top coming out of the front of his truck was driving in right towards us, and one of us was sitting in the parking lot, and he was just gonna and he's going, and thought, what, this guy's crazy, he's gonna run right over us. And then he got out and he was grumbling and complaining, and who the hell parked their car over the line over here? And I thought, whoa, this guy crazy. Anyhow, but I was open to meeting him and surrendering to who he was. He ended up being hilarious, funny, engaging, curious, just a hoot. Yeah, like a walking comedian. He brought his stage with him everywhere he went. But I got a really good laugh from this man. But originally, when I first saw him, I was like, the mind could easily go, be careful, this guy is nuts. Avoid, 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 ego strategy. No, surrender to what is, be open to what is. And then I totally saw that this was a really wonderful person. But in order to be able to surrender to what is, we need to have a certain level of trust and confidence in ourselves to begin with. And that comes through meditation practice, through mindfulness practice, through turning towards suffering and stress and beauty and joy. And we learn to have confidence that we can be open, we can relax in the midst of chaos and change and impermanence. And then as we have developed trust and confidence in ourselves, then we start developing trust and confidence in others too. and seeing the beauty or the gifts that others have. Um, if you don't have trust and confidence, keep practicing. But one other practice that really support you is the loving kindness metta practice. Because if you do the loving kindness metta practice every day, you will fall in love with people. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah. You just fall in love with people. I have been doing loving kindness practice before with tears in my eyes, because I'm just so in love with the people I'm sending the loving kindness to. I've done loving kindness practice when I don't give a damn about that person too, but you know, it does soften the heart. And then there are times when I'm like, oh God, I love you. Yeah, I just feel so much kindness towards you. And that loving kindness gives us the trust and confidence to open. And it also, the more we open and connect with, the more we realize we see our own reflection in the eyes of others. We see the humanity in all beings, and we realize we surrender to who we really are, which is not separate. Yeah. So this is the key, what we can get out of surrendering to life. Like I said, it takes effort because we have to practice being vulnerable, being open, and being mindful. And when we do that, wisdom grows. A wise, the wise understanding of how life is constantly flowing, always changing, miraculous. We never know what's coming next. It's a mystery. It's a package each day, a present to to take the wrapping off and see what's in the box. Sometimes it's scary what's in the box and challenging to deal with, and other times it's beautiful. And what I've learned is that the challenging times are the times when I need to practice and put more effort into my practice, to wise relationship with what is, to surrendering to what is. Surrendering to what is. I was early on in my practice, I had severe back pain. I was in so much pain I couldn't sit up without back support. And I would be crying on retreats with stabbing pain in my upper back. And they kept telling me to open and surrender to the sensations, to what is. And I was like, oh my God. Oh, and so every so often I would surrender to all the sensations and allow them to be there. And I would be crying with the pain. And then amazing things would happen, like poof, the pain would go away. And I would be sitting in relaxation and love and joy. And yeah. Every time I've been able to totally surrender to anger, to the desire to get revenge, to fear that's making my whole body anxious. Every time I've been able to fully open to these things, to the best of my ability, but fully open to them, surrender, allow them to come within me, to shake up that which is no longer who I am. Those things have stripped away that which is not who I am when I totally surrender to it. And I trust and have confidence that opening to the difficulties shakes away the delusion of who I'm not, right? And opens me to who I am. It'll open you to who you are. And then you're like, whoa, wow, this is cool. I don't need to continue in all these fear-based strategies to convince people of anything. All I need to do is just rest in who we are. rest in who we are. So surrendering to this mystery called life and trusting that life will provide you whatever you need to awaken, to be free. And I have full confidence that if you can open to and surrender to it, you will be able to let go to a new and beautiful level. And you'll be able to experience your true nature. Here's wakefulness. It was by the Buddha and the Dhammapada. Wakefulness is the way to life. The fool sleeps as if he were already dead. But the master is awake and lives forever. The master watches, is clear. Oh, how happy is the master, for the master sees that wakefulness is life. How happy the master is, following the path of the awakened. With great perseverance, the master meditates, seeking freedom and happiness. Thank you for your listening.